Hello, everybody. My name is Andrzej Harbicki, like I already mentioned, and I am part of GFT. And within GFT, I focus on industrial subjects, which means that my perspective is a little bit different than, let's say, blockchain community perspective, because industry, as you can imagine, is a bit more conservative, while the blockchain community is cutting edge. Within this conservative perspective, I would like to tell you a little bit about the tools that the companies need to use in order to be more effective, more efficient, and basically survive the upcoming changes. And one of the major tools is digitalisation, of course. But then there's another set of tools called ESG regulation, which many people think about as something that you have to do, because regulation is something that comes from the top, and you have to fulfill them. But I think this is not the optimal way to look at it. I think the optimal way to look at it is, you always have the choice to look at things. They are either a challenge or opportunity. So I think it's worth to look at ESG as an opportunity. If you don't mind, I'd like to say a few words about my company, where we come from, to make sure that you feel that we know what we're talking about, because we're quite a large company with over 10,000 people implementing software solutions for various customers, and we've been doing this for a couple of years now. And what is maybe very important is that we are a very transparent company. We are, publicly traded, so our financials are open. And we come from the sector of banking. The majority of our business was and still is in banking industry, which means that we have a strong affinity to things like Bitcoin, but mostly to manipulation of data, because banking is all about data. And we use this know-how to help our customers from other sectors, like industrial sectors, to use this data in the most efficient way. And sustainability is also a big part of our DNA. We strongly believe that things that need to be changed are something that is good for everyone. That's why we pay attention that our developers, so our main workforce, these are people who understand what it means to code in the most optimal way from the green perspective, from the environmental perspective. We also make sure that we are giving back to the communities, and what is really important, and as Peter Drucker said, if you don't measure something, then you can't manage it. So we make sure that our managers have incentive from being focused on ESG subjects. But enough about my company. Let's talk about our customers' companies. So when I will talk to you about ESG and digitalization, I would like to, let's say, focus on certain examples, right? Because it's easier to think this way. And when you look at a company that manufactures something, and typically those are the companies that will be hit most by the ESG, and they need these strategies a lot, because manufacturing means energy usage, right? You cannot manufacture anything without energy. And if you've been on the forum presentation by my colleague Łukasz, he showed this picture about different industrial revolutions. It's always about energy in the background. It wouldn't be possible without certain approach to energy. So now we will have a regulation that basically puts a lot of attention on how you use this energy. So this means it will have a huge impact on a given company. But let's park this ESG part aside, and let's think about how the company works, and how the company will have to work. there are different levels to any given company. On the bottom, you have individual machines and line producing lines. Then you look one layer higher, you look at the whole factory, and then at the whole company, because of course one company can have more than one factory. And so each of these items that you see on the slide generates certain data, and then this data flows up and down, and every level generates a little bit different data. So it's really not a trivial question what to do, which data to store, which data will be useful in the future. And yet, this is pretty critical, because once you have these data flows, you will apply them to business processes, and actually quite a bit more. Because what can you do with the data? So initially, when you think about it, the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, you go for, how can I use this data to improve my products? How can I use this data to improve how I interact with customers and sell my products or services? And that's actually, if you look at it from a broader perspective, what you do with the data, you do, let's say, three major things. First, you try to make sure that you lower your costs. That's why, in case of products, you will create maybe some digital twins to make testing easier, to make testing faster, and that will lower your costs. But then you will look at how you sell and what kind of information you get about your customers, because this way you will get the feedback from the market, much more accurate feedback than just generic market research, about how to improve your products, which features should go in, which means that you increase your margin. And then, if your company is really smart, will use things like artificial intelligence to make those services that you put on the market way easier for the customers to use, which means that you will broaden your customer base. And this means that you will have lower costs, you will have higher margin, and you will have more customers. You will be much more competitive on the market. And in the beginning, I mentioned about this mega trend and this energy transformation. But there are, of course, other mega trends that will affect companies. Like, there's like decoupling from China, and people move production to Europe. At least that's what they are talking about. Because, like in case of Poland, we have like 5% of unemployment rate, which means, so where do you want to put this transferred work to? There are not enough people. And the only way to do it is to make the companies work smarter and move up in the value chain. And the data is the only way to do it. And the kind of like major point from the perspective of the industrial customer, and I told you the industry is always a bit conservative. So the first thing they will think about is the energy. So let's use it as an example. When we're talking about the digitalization of this particular aspect, the companies will look at the ways they can manage their energy consumption. And of course, you need to gather data to know what your energy consumption is. But then it turns out that once you know things, you can make choices. So you can move from using one sort of energy to using the other sort of energy, which means that you can reduce your carbon footprint. But again, industry is conservative, so maybe they will not think about the planet as a whole, but maybe they will think about putting this information again to the customer. And customers nowadays, there are many, there's many research about it. Customers want to know how much CO2 has been used to manufacture a given product, and they tend to choose those that are more green. So you see from the very beginning that if you gather enough data and you have enough knowledge about what you do in your company, you can improve how you deal with your customers. But then the next step is you can use artificial intelligence and use it for prediction. So it will give you a hint for the future actions. These predictions, of course, are still in the infancy. So it's not like out of your data you will get a prediction for the next year and it will give you the strategy sort of automatic. Those are much more short term, but still they give choices. And then once you learn how to use those predictions and you will have enough data, you will be able to optimize your whole company. This is, by the way, something very interesting because when we look at our customers, only really the biggest customers who have a lot of money can afford like company-wide optimizations. But the thing with IT is that there's the strongest technological inflation in the IT, which means the technologies become much more accessible with time. Something that, let's say, 20 years ago, if you wanted to have even simple, data from your production line, you would have to go to those, manufacturer of machines and get the latest and greatest and invest millions and millions of dollars or euros. Nowadays, you can actually use IT technology to get the same result using much less. So this is quite impressive, and it'd be shame not to use this particular feature of IT. So once you focus on what you manufacture, right, on what are your products and so on, and you will get familiar with how to use data in your company. The next step is that actually with enough technology and using AI, you can model the behavior of your company using statistical models and so on. And this means that you can model the outputs of your companies. This means that you can actually model even your ESG score. Model means, you create a perfect picture where you want to go to, right? It doesn't mean that it will change the whole company on the fly, but it allows you to model certain aspects of company's behavior. And then this modeling means that you can do experiments. What will happen if I move all the production to use green energy? What will happen if I have a split, or I will invest in my own generation capabilities? What will happen if this or that? So all of this is possible if you are very careful with your data and you don't throw it away. Now, why is this all important? I mean, why would you want to model for ESG score, right? So maybe let's go back a little bit. A couple of years ago, it was very loud about corporate social responsibilities, right? And all the companies, they were trying to show that they are responsible, that they plant trees, which is, by the way, great. But what is maybe important from our perspective is that CSR was for various stakeholders, basically, for many, many different people. Everyone could find something for themselves, right? Now, ESG is very targeted. ESG is for the investors. So this is the perspective, which means that the investors will make sure that they get data, and they are backed up by the regulation authorities, right? So there is no messing around. There will be 1 or 2 years of a gap where you can adjust how you deal with ESG, but sooner or later an audit will come and they will point out what you have to change in your company. So it only seems smart to know beforehand. Now, since it's investor's perspective, you can already see on the investor's webpage what they do with the ESG data. And you have some data hubs where you can read about what data has been gathered and so on. But what is behind is that this data will be used to generate basically a list, right? A score. And and companies think about, okay, what's my score? you know, you're one of the of hundreds of companies in Europe or in the world. So your score will be compared to others companies' score, which means, you know, that the comparison is done for a reason. And since this is investor perspective, you might only think, what's the reason? The reason is the access to capital and the cost of the capital. And we are living in a financial capitalism, which means that the access to capital is the crucial aspect of any business, right? We're not in a production capitalism, right? Like in China, we're in the financial one. So it is really critical to make sure that you understand how this data will affect your ESG. And that already shows that if you look at the ESG just like as another regulation to have to fulfill, you will have, well, not so good competitive positioning because you will not be able to harvest the insights from this data. But if you use your digitalization and you will do with your data things to optimize your company, the ESG reporting, at least in some of the areas like energy, will be a byproduct that will be almost for free, and yet will allow you to get, for example, better financing. So if we look at a single dashboard like this, and I'm getting to the end of my presentation, by the way, so this shows you an example implementation of what we did for one of our customers. They are able to see what are the sources of energy. Now, okay, this is still a basic approach where, you know, we look at the contracted energy, not actually what is in the cable, right? This is a bit tricky, but at least from the contractual perception. But what we can measure is what is auto-consumption, what goes to others. We can measure how much energy went into any given product, and if you have given different product lines, you can get this knowledge as well. And you see that this data can be really used by management to optimize what they make and how they make it and where they invest. Now you have to think about ESG now, that sort of data, maybe not as granular as this, but this sort of data will be available to investors. And the investors will look at charts similar to this maybe, and will say, okay, what's the cost of per product for this company and for this company? They both make similar product. This one has a better cost and energy structure, so we will invest in this one. Or we will give funding at half a percentage point less. And this will already create a huge impact. So make sure that you don't look at ESG as just a simple reporting activity. Make sure that you use it for your advantage and not for the advantage of the market, because market will harvest its advantages. And make sure that using right digitalization strategy, you're not left behind.